This video is all about running a 5-1. It's the most basic but also most essential offense to run in the indoor game. Let's dive right into it. You read the title. This video is all about how to run a 5-1 offense. It's without a doubt the most common offense run in the game of volleyball for a couple reasons. Number one, your hitters are set by the same setter the entire time. So there's that consistency and tempo and timing of sets between your setter and your hitter. Secondly, when your setter is in the front row, they have the option to contact the ball, whether it's a dump, an attack, in a lot of different ways that can't take place in a different offense like a 6-2. And lastly, a 5-1 limits your amount of subs that you have to take. In the men's game, you get 12 subs per set. And when you're in that 5-1 offense, you get more flexibility to add in serving subs, to sub in DSs when needed, blocking subs occasionally when necessary. So it gives you all three of those advantages, among others. So those are the pros, but what is a 5-1? A 5-1 offense means there's 5 attackers, one setter. And that one setter rotates in every rotation around the court, all 6, and sets out of every single one, both the back row and the front row. There's a couple keys to know about a 5-1 offense. The first key is understanding what rotation you're in and where you're supposed to be in both serve receive and base defense. A lot of teams do it differently. I'm going to break down how I prefer for it to be done based on my experience in the game. So we're going to go through all 6 rotations in serve receive, where you're supposed to go. We'll break it down, super simple for you. This is something that you have to know if you want to play volleyball at the next level. Understanding the 5-1, understanding your rotation, knowing where you have to go in serve receive, blocking, defense, what routes you can run. All of this comes into play the further you get in the game. Let's dive right into it. There are 6 rotations on the court, and in most cases, teams will start their sets either in row 6 or row 1, depending on if they're serving or receiving. This can depend on a lot of factors. Sometimes teams will move to row 6 to start if they're in receive. That way, if they have a strong setter as a server, they can have them serve first and start the game off on a good strong server. But there's a lot of different reasons for which rotation you can start. I'm not going to break down all of them, but it could be preference of server, preference of having your setter back row. So if that's the case, you want to start in rotation 1 so you can get all 3 back row setter options right away to maybe get a lead in the game. A lot of different ways you can take it. You can look at matchups, but bottom line is you have to start somewhere. To know where you're going to start, you have to know each rotation, so we're going to go through all 6. So rotation 1 in serve receive is going to look something like this. The setter is going to be in the 1. So there's 6 quadrants on the court. The setter is going to be in the 1 zone, in zone 1. In front of him is going to be the OH1. This OH1 is going to be a passer. Typically we have 2 of our outsides passing and a libero passing at one time. Next to the OH1 passing is the libero passing out of the center in row 1. Next to the libero passing is going to be the OH2. In this case was a DS, so a defensive specialist. But it's typically going to be these 3 passers in rotation 1. So you have your setter who's back row, you have your OH1, your outside hitter number 1, who is front row. He's going to pass this ball and then make a route forward. Your libero and your outside. This is your right side hitter. He is front row. This was a really strong server, so he may or may not help out with the pass with 4-man serve receive. And also front row is your M2. So here's the key with row 1. You have 3 front row players. Your OH1, your M2, and your right side. The key with understanding the 5-1 offense is knowing that you're always opposite your position player on the court. So when we line it up on a grid, the middle is opposite of the libero or the other middle. The outside is opposite the other outside, and the right side is opposite the other of the setter. Now it looks a little fumbled here, it looks confusing, but let me put it this way. Setter's here, libero's here, outside's here, right side's here, middle's here, and outside's there. So if you look at it that way and you make these diagonal crosses, these players are all opposite each other. In serve receive, we want to find the best orientation to make sure that we're getting an optimal pass and we're getting as many contacts on the ball as we can. So that's why in row 1, we have this outside dropping back, pushing the setter back so he can hit, the middle can hit, and the right side can hit, giving us 3 options to pass. Typically, you'll see outsides passing more than right sides because it's easier rotationally, and generally, outsides are better passers than right sides, so it just makes more sense to have them in receive. But this is row 1. Key things to know. In row 1, the setter's back row, you have 3 hitters, and your outside's hitting right side first in receives. And then immediately following the serve, these players will go to base defense. Base defense for the libero is in zone 5 right here. So after we serve receive, he will go there for defense. The OH2 or the outsides play defense typically in the 6. So he will play base defense around here. And the setters and right sides play defense in zone 1, so he will play defense in this area. I know it's a lot, but once you can grasp this concept of your opposite, your other player, and moving around guys in different rotations to get as many options as a hitter as possible, that's the key here, okay? All right, let's move on to rotation 2. So looking at the grid in rotation 2, our 3 front row players are outside. Right here, he's in front of these 2 players. Our right side is still front row, and our middle M2 is still front row. All right, this is what it looks like in serve receive for row 2. You have this outside pushing back. He's going to pass first. He is opposite of the outside on the grid because this outside just served in row 2. So he would be starting here opposite this guy. The right side is 1 position before that outside, so he's opposite of this guy, but he's pushing him up because he's back row still. And the middle is on the grid on this position opposite this middle, but since this outside can push back, he just has to stay in front of the libero. So this is what this looks like. You have 3 passers, 1 front row, 1 libero, 1 back row. You have a right side who's going to go out here and transition to the right. This middle is going to wait for this serve to come in and make his approach around the setter, and your outside coming in for his regular approach. Like I said before, the setter's in row 2 is back row, so he can't make an attack over the net or dump the ball over the plane, but he has 1, 2, 3, 4 options to set, and you'll see this play out here. Serve comes to our OH2, Grayson, our M2 Kirk transitions to the middle, and we run a ball to that middle on that route. And then after the ball is set, we go to base defense. So our libero goes to zone 5, our outside goes to zone 6, and our setter goes to zone 1. These front row guys go to their zones to block, and then we play the rally out from there. That's zone 2. Let's move on to rotation 3. All right, here's rotation 3. This is the last rotation where the setter's in the back row. You can see our setter is opposite the right side. Since liberos don't serve in the men's game, our libero is opposite our M1 right here, and our OH2 is still front row. He's opposite Devin, our OH1, but he's pushed back in serve receive. So we have 1 front row, 1 front row, 1 front row in row 3, back row setter, back row OH1. Serve comes into our OH2. Everyone transitions to either base defense or their approach routes. And Grayson sets this ball out to the pin, and Esteban tips this ball out of bounds. But you can see everyone transitioning to their base defense. Will comes to zone 5. Devin is covering on this ball, so he's pushed up here, maybe a little bit too far. But everyone going to their base defense after the serve. Next rotation is rotation 4. This is when the setter moves to the front row. So you can see Grayson is front row here. Row 4 is when is following the right side server. So you can see he's opposite the right side, and our right side's now back row. So now we have 2 front row hitters. Mason, who is slightly inside Grayson here, and Esteban, who is slightly inside these 2 players. Now, since Esteban, our OH2, is front row here, he has to be to the right of these 2 guys in rotation 4. Devin's back row, Will is back row, so as long as these 2 guys, Will and Devin, are behind Esteban, we're in good shape. In row 4, Camden here has to stay to the right of Will because he just served. So these 2 are shifting over. This guy's pulling back, and after this serve receive, you will see where everyone moves to. So Devin will take this pass. Esteban, our front row hitter, is transitioning to the outside. Mason's transitioning to the middle. Esteban attacks this ball, and we get good block coverage here, and Esteban puts this ball away. You can also see our right side here. Even though he's back row, we still run this route, which is called a D ball. It's a back row. It's a back row attack set on the right side, about a foot in front of the 10-foot line. It's about the pace a little bit slower than a BIC, which is a 1-tempo set in the middle. So that's another route that can be run, another ball that can be set, since in row 4, this setter is now front row. All right, on to row 5. Rotation 5 is the second rotation where the setter's front row. You can see he's lined up in the middle of the court here, opposite this right side. Middles are opposite. Devin is now front row. We're in row 5 since our outside just served. We have a DS in, so before we're in serve receive passing, Devin would be opposite Josh here. So we have 1 front row, 1 front row, 1 front row here. Back row, back row, back row. He will transition to hit. He will transition to defense in zone 5. He will set front row and block the right side. He will approach and block middle. And he will bring his path out here for a back row attack and then play defense in the 1. So since our right sides aren't usually passing here, you can see Camden just kind of going to his spot, ready for an approach right when that ball is contacted. Josh passes a perfect ball here, sets this ball to the outside to Devin, who is front row, and he puts a good attack on this ball. All right, this is the last rotation. This is row 6. This is the last rotation where our setter is in the front row. So you can see he's in zone 6 here. Our right side is opposite him. Our middles are opposite on the corners, and our outsides are opposite here. Devin is transitioned back to pass. We have 1 front row, 1 front row, 1 front row, back row running a D ball, and everyone running their routes after the pass. So you can see this ball is passed by Will. Everyone ready for their approach. We have 3 hitters ready to go. Grayson sets this ball to Devin, and he terminates. Those are all 6 rotations. It's vital to have them memorized as a setter, because when you're setting, you need to know where everyone's at on the court. Make sure they're in the right position. Make sure you're not out of rotation. That's one thing that drives coaches absolutely crazy, is when players don't know where they're supposed to be, players don't know where they're supposed to go next, or they don't know what rotation they're in. So if you can remember all these, you're going to find your way on the court. Your coach is going to trust you in those key moments, especially my setters. If you're a setter, please study these. Look at a list of grids of each rotation and know where you have to be. That way when it comes to game time, there's no surprises, no guesses, just execution. Running a 5-1 is really as simple as understanding where to rotate, where to be, and how to move collectively as a unit. If you can do that with one setter, it makes it easy to have 3 or 4 attackers at all times. If you have a taller, more athletic setter, it gives you the ability to incorporate some front row attacks for them within the course of the game. So there's some additional benefits to running a 5-1, some like the 6-2, and I think there's definitely some pros to that as well. But for this video, the 5-1 is something you'll see most teams incorporate into their game, so it's something you want to be aware of. Hopefully you learned a little bit from this video. Take something home with you. That's all I got. Study up, and we'll see you in the next one. Thanks for watching. Peace.